We take that purchase price, your contract price, and allocate it among taxable and non-taxable elements so that you don't inadvertently overstamp a deed, to use Florida language. We provide you with prima facie, third-party, state-certified evidence in the form of an appraisal that justifies and the payment for transfer tax.
Hey everybody, Beau Beery here. We have an awesome guest today. Let me tell you how I know Todd Jones. Todd Jones is with Real Advice. Go to realadvice.com. I've known Todd for probably at least a decade, maybe even 2 decades, going back to when I was a master's in real estate student at the University of Florida. Todd was on the board back then. I've known him from several different players. And I've just had a lot of apartment investors call me, email me, message me, especially over the last few years as values have increased, and say, hey, this Todd guy is legit. He's awesome. He's doing amazing things for our business, for our assets, for our values, for our investors. And so we are just really blessed to have Todd on here. He's going to give some incredible advice, enough so that you understand what's going on. And then you need to call him for the rest because it gets kind of deep. Todd, thanks so much for being on, man. Introduce yourself real quick, and then we want to jump right into it.
Thanks a lot, Beau. I've been appraising for 40 years. My dad was an assessor, and that's how I ended up in the state and local tax practice. I'm a Deloitte alumni. I have an MBA in finance. Interestingly, around 2007, I partnered with a fella who's now retired, who was a CPA business valuer. Okay. And it was started as intellectual curiosity. How do you do what you do, from both sides? And after a number of years, we figured out how to bridge the gap between the two disciplines. Well, that was fortuitous because in 2017, we testified on behalf of Disney in precedent-setting property tax litigation over in Orange County that got international attention. And as a result, we've done work in 34 states. We've worked with some of the biggest players in the industry, and our success rate is unmatched in the industry.
Once you prove a concept with a case like Disney and it goes through that rigmarole, you've got a proven concept. You have a legit enterprise on saving folks some money here.
Yeah, it's true. The reality is that most players ignore the fact that what they're really buying is going concern. When you buy an apartment development, it's a business. The real estate is the primary asset, but without the people, without the contracts in place, you don't have a viable asset. For state and local tax purposes, what is taxable, using layman's terms, is the dirt, bricks, and sticks. They don't rent themselves. They don't keep the tenants happy. Yep. They don't repair themselves. That's all people in contracts. So you look at your standard P&L for a multifamily project, your number 2 line item, payroll. Payroll is not people. Another way to look at this is, what would that same asset price at without any tenants at all, without any management at all, without any market presence, no social media presence, no website, no advertising? That delta is the business value. And that business value is a riskier element than the real estate itself. Land, for the most part, is going to always be there. The buildings, they're going to deteriorate over time, but they're a lot less susceptible to damage or something adverse happening than, say, for instance, a bad report or trend in social media that adversely impacts your reputation, your client relationship. That's why we do reputation management through social media when we're operating one of these kinds of assets. So on average, and I can tell you, we've done over 1,000 properties across 34 states.
Incredible.
On average, multifamily, whether it's conventional or student housing, we're increasing first-year NOI by about 15%.
That's amazing.
It's a deal maker or breaker.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not just that adjustment year after the sale. Having a lower basis from the start continues well into the future.
You're exactly right, Beau.
Especially in the state of Florida, where it's on the non-school portion is capped at 10% per year.
The reality is, even in states with a cap like Florida's, every state has what we refer to in the industry as a uniformity statute. It flows from the U.S. Constitution Equal Protection Clause. And it basically says that an assessor can't treat your property in year 2, 3, 4, 5 differently than the competitive set. So if they take the competitive set up 5%, they're not supposed to take you up 10%. And I don't want to get into the weeds on the nuance of Florida law, but it's a little more complicated. We live in the 21st century and nothing is simple anymore.
Tell the viewers, to the extent you can, what are you doing enough so that they can give you a call? Because I really believe in this concept. I think everyone should be calling you. And then also tell us, how often should they call you? Should they call you every year? Is it just before you close? Is it after you close? Should it be every subsequent year to make sure they keep the values in check? Tell us why folks should call you up.
So we have a very narrow lane, Beau. We work on acquisition and disposition scenarios only. Traditional property tax service providers, I mean, I did that for over 30 years. It's fine. It's a really important element of profitably operating one of these businesses because property tax is your largest operating expense. So in a 5 cap world, that's $17 added to net asset value if you save it, right? So if you're selling an asset, we are usually approached right about the time the offering memorandum is being finalized. If you're buying an asset, we're typically approached right about the time that LOI is being signed, or for good clients, we'll work with them to help them win the deal at best and final.
So a seller could hire you prior to going to market, working with the broker to put together the OM, because they want to be able to show prospective buyers, here is what someone in the tax industry has determined is a likely scenario for assessed values post-closing. It's been vetted. Here's a report on why. And so that gives the pool of buyers the ability to sort of eliminate that uncertainty. If the seller doesn't hire you, if the seller doesn't hire you in that scenario for whatever reason, then we have the buyer side where the broker can be telling the buyers, hey, you need to talk to Todd Jones. Here's what he can do for you. Here's why it's important.
Right. And, best and final can be really competitive. And there's only so much that an acquisitions analyst can stretch on forecasting rent growth. In the current environment, expense growth is a serious topic. But when you're looking at 15% increase in NOI attributable to proper payment of property taxes, it gives you more room to stretch. It's another deal point. It's another analytical element to throw into the mix for justifying pricing.
Tell the difference between cost segregation and what you do.
Great question. So cost segregation is a federal tax minimization strategy that is based on accelerated depreciation. So conceptually, it's similar in that we're identifying different components of asset, classifying them properly so that we can maximize depreciation. It's a very valuable and almost routinely profitable exercise. What we do is conceptually similar in that 45 states do not permit the taxation of intangible assets for transfer tax or property tax purposes. So we take that purchase price, your contract price, and allocate it among taxable and non-taxable elements so that you don't inadvertently overstamp a deed, to use Florida language. We provide you with prima facie third-party state-certified evidence in the form of an appraisal that justifies and the payment for transfer tax.
Are there minimum values that you work on or that should be worked on at which it's just not worth looking at this? What's the deal on that?
At this point in time, deals below 10 million contract price don't pencil out for us. So anything 10 million or above, we're happy to take a look at. And we'll tell you before you engage us whether or not we can render any value.
How are you paid without stating specific, percentages or amounts or whatever? Is it a percentage? Is it an hourly? Is it a flat fee? How's that done?
So our service is a bundled service. There's a flat fee for the appraisal, and then there's a performance fee for the savings.
Good. So it's kind of aligned.
Yeah. I mean, as appraisers, we have an arm's length professional standards mandate, but there's nothing that we do that is stretch on those professional standards. Everything that we do meets the Dalbert standard for trial court purposes. Everything that we do is very much inside the lines when it comes to professional methods and techniques.
Last question. What's probably your favorite case study on the apartment side?
I can tell you that not a specific one doesn't come to mind, but I can tell you that for multifamily assets, there's always a range. It depends on pricing. It depends on the vintage of the asset. With multifamily assets, the range I've seen anywhere from as low as 20% to a high of 55%. The average is about a third of these contract prices being non-taxable. That said, with the Fed's recent actions in jacking interest rates, we expect to see a retrenchment on pricing. buying because the cost of money goes up. So that will probably bring those percentages down some.
It's still extremely worth the exercise, particularly over 10 million. Awesome. Well, dude, thank you for being on. How can folks reach you?
Best way is inquiries at realadvice.com or 813-444-4321.
Awesome. And I'll put that down in the description, guys. Please reach out to Todd. He knows what he's doing. Thanks for being on, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.